Hello and welcome to the Anne and Phelim Scoop.
I'm Anne McElhenney.
And I'm Phelim McAleer. Yes.
And it's week 78. That's 1 year and 6.5 months since the 2 weeks to flatten the curve lockdown. And 14 weeks since it was revealed that Hunter Biden used the N-word and the mainstream media has failed to report it. Mimi Groves was not as lucky, and we've talked about Mimi Groves on this.
She's the 14. She used it when she was 14, and it was used to destroy her college admissions when she was 18. Yeah. That's what happens when you're not part of the protected class in this country and in this world. So, what's on the show today? First of all, we look at the stupid, cliched 9/11 losers. Why they are losers and why we lost the war in Afghanistan. From college to professors to former presidents, those who got it wrong will always get it wrong because they are wrong about everything. And
later, Phelim's going to be talking to Phil Kirpin about COVID madness. Mandates.
And madness.
And madness. The Delta variant.
Yes. And then everyone's talking about the US Open star, Emma Raducanu, the Romanian British girl, a Canadian girl. But did you know that her parents were unable to watch her victory in person? And do you know why? Because it's more Chinese corona madness. We'll talk about that. And we're going to have the writer of the My Son Hunter movie in the house, Brian Godow, is going to be here. I'm going to interview him. And we're going to look at some lovely messages from you. But first, I just have one question. And I just have to move the microphone for this. Who wears it better? And if you're on YouTube or anywhere you can see it, who wears it better, Top Cat or Anne McElhenney?
Or Anne McElhenney.
So we are the walking wounded. So Top Cat broke his left arm 2 months ago, and Anne McElhenney broke her clavicle.
Right clavicle, which involves all the right parts of the right hand and the right bits of this. Yes, I broke my clavicle trying to bring the news to you, by the way.
We were going to cover a court case over in Santa Monica Courthouse, and literally there's a raised platform that says no protesting beyond this point, and rather than paint a line in the sand, as they say, no protesting beyond this point, they decided to have a raised platform in the sand, which Anne McElhenney tripped over on her way to cover a court case.
Spectacularly tripped over on my way to court on Friday.
And look at those hot firemen. I mean, and if you want to meet hot LA firemen, there are better ways, right?
No, there has to be a better way to meet a hot fireman because...
Oh God. Ready, miss? Let's get your legs under you.
Legs ready.
All right.
The pain is so awful that you just don't care about anything. Yes. I couldn't... It was so bad, I couldn't even look up. Just a horrible situation. Anyway, we've had a week of doctors talking and deciding no surgery, yes surgery, no surgery.
Well, anyway, so you're not going to be present for a lot of this podcast because you have to go and spend some quality time with your doctors and your surgeons. So we'll keep everyone very much informed on that. You're not going for surgery just yet, but shortly. But there's a lot of prep work to do, and you have to go for X-rays and EKGs and DCAs and RIPs and VCAs and.
Don't mention RIP. Move on.
So we move on. Yeah. So let's talk about the 9/11 losers. Let's talk about Jen N. Jackson, whose PhD. I'd love to read her PhD.
She is an abolitionist, which I asked Phelim about because I do know what the word abolitionist means, but I think
what does it mean nowadays?
That's what I meant. What does it mean nowadays? What does an abolitionist do of a Friday night nowadays?
I cannot tell you about an abolitionist.
But anyway, she's also a writer and she's a professor and she's gender flux all pronouns, but has to be referred to as they.
Right.
She's a columnist for Teen Vogue, but worst of all, she's a professor.
Yeah, so she has come to, over 9/11, she said, we have to be more honest about what 9/11 was and what it wasn't. It was an attack on the heteropatriarchal capitalistic systems that America relies upon to wrangle other countries into passivity. It was an attack on the systems that many white Americans fight to protect.
Can I ask Phelim a question?
Yes.
Yeah, because I'm not very well, so I have to ask questions about things I don't understand. Phelim, what's heteropatriarchal? Well, I'm actually impressed I was able to say that, by the way. Yeah. What's hetero? Hetero means not gay, is that right?
So I get in this terms it probably means heterosexual is homosexual. Homosexual is man on hetero in this particular context means
people,
means normal.
Oh, normal.
The mainstream, I think mainstream. Means that. Yeah, because It means mainstream, right?
Mainstream patriarchal,
so
capitalistic
patriarchal,
systems.
right? So it's an attack on the patriarchy, basically.
That's boys.
Yeah, and men, right? And their capitalistic systems. But it's really great to know that Osama bin Laden was an early feminist. Attacking the patriarchal system. It's that is the level of scholarship that students are.
Do you know, I read that and I thought of important children in our lives, and I thought,
imagine,
God preserve them and save them from contact with this woman.
Yes,
this is a terrible person.
Yes, and look at this, and she has a T-shirt. Flint still doesn't have clean water.
Yeah, and you know what? I've got news for you, sweetie. You know why Clint doesn't?
No, actually, sorry, no. And let me tell you one thing. Flint does have clean water.
Oh, okay.
Flint does have clean water.
But if it ever had a problem, by the way,
Flint had one problem, was that there was water goes through lead pipes like most places in America, but there's this thing, is a chemical you put in that neutralizes the lead, and they didn't put it in. The Democrats who ran Flint didn't put it in.
The Democrats?
And now they do, because Flint went bust, and they do put it in, and the water is clean. You can drink it. The water is not contaminated. You can drink it. So stop spreading lies like that. But it goes on. It's not just some weirdo professor. You've got the New York Times. They had a long interview with an FBI agent. Who basically left the FBI and leaked papers to journalists because, was this what I've become? Basically, he saw there was no difference between the FBI and the terrorists he was fighting. So then we've got, more New York Times stuff. Look at these headlines here. The legacy of America's post 9/11 turned to torture. 20 years later, we're still, and it's like these were enhanced interrogations.
Yes.
Torture is, there's a legal definition of torture, and by no means did any of the treatment of the prisoners of Al-Qaeda rise to torture. It just didn't. And then what I like is in this screen grab is below, like, torture. You want to talk about torture? The trial of the men accused of plotting the 9/11 attacks is at least another year away. They have been in custody, I think, for 10 or 15 years.
Wow.
And the trial is another year away. That is torture for the victims of 9/11. And it's very much like the court case we went to, actually, over in Santa Monica. 10 years of court. And as Mark Steyn, and we'll be coming to Mark Steyn in a minute, Mark Steyn said in America, the process is the punishment. The judiciary system is so unfit for purpose that to be involved in it is a punishment in itself.
Well, his court case with Michael Mann
has
now gone on for how long?
It's now in its 10th year.
You talk about term limits, by the way. There should be term limits on that.
Yes.
And there should be if the court system can't work, then they should find somebody else to be in the court system other than the people that are there.
I think term limits is good. I think limits is good. But Mark Steyn said it so well, actually. I just felt, we should just talk about what he said, and he was going, as he said in his latest column, go to Steyn Online, Steyn. The official observances for the 20th century anniversary of 9/11 managed to be even more wretched and grotesque than I'd expected. The most obvious affront being George W. Bush's equivalence between the perpetrators of 9/11 and the perpetrators of 1/6, that is the January riot at the Capitol. He said they were both children of the same foul spirit, diminishing, and as Mark Steyn says, this diminishes the 3,000 victims
100%.
Of 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
As Mark Steyn says, and I'll quote him here, he said, declared, diminishing the 3,000 victims of 9/11 by comparing them to a congressman who had to hide in a stationery cupboard because some goofball was taking selfies with his feet up on the desk.
Oh, yeah.
20, by the way, this is amazing. He says, 20 years ago, Mark Steyn says, the 43rd president's entire executive branch totally failed the nation. Funny, I was talking to you about this at the weekend, right? Mm-hmm. And he quotes from his book, America Alone. You should read America Alone. He quotes, FAA Command Center, do we want to think about scrambling aircraft? FAA headquarters, God, I don't know. This is a tape. This is a transcript. FAA Command Center, that's a decision somebody's going to have to make in the next 10 minutes. FAA headquarters, everybody just left the room. They evacuated the room, right? FAA headquarters, they were supposed to be protecting the skies above America. and they all just left the room. They all left the buildings. Everybody, as Mark Steyn says, you're federal government in action. And under Bush, no one paid a price for it. George Bush, by the way, left the room. I don't know if people remember this. George Bush got into his plane after 9/11 and flew around because it was the most secure place to be, up in the air. And people were wondering for hours and hours and hours. It was the
Where is he?
Where is he? Right? It was hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And these were long hours on 9/11.
Yeah, before he appeared.
He didn't appear till the evening, and the attack happened at 9 o'clock in the morning. And, everyone left the room. And as Mark Steyn said, White House fed the Treasury, but not the IRS. He says, where they're still hard at it, freezing the accounts of insurrectionists' 9-year-old grandkids. They can do that now, And
I think the other thing that he said in that article, if I'm correct, Phelim, is that the names of the people, the names of the extraordinary people on the United Flight 93, he didn't even name them. He didn't even say their names. I mean, one of the names, obviously, that I was thinking about over the whole days over that weekend, and thinking about 20 years ago where we were. We were living in Bucharest in Romania at the time, but just reading, and I put it up on my Facebook because I thought it was so powerful, and a lot of you probably have read it. But Todd Beamer's transcript of his 911 call is to Lisa, who was at the end of the line, this woman called Lisa. Yeah. And that transcript it's unbelievable, the bravery that this guy showed. This was an ordinary person. And it really does, the contrast between the ordinary Todd Beamer and his behaviour under the most difficult possible circumstances that could be imagined versus the President of the United States on that day.
Or by the way,
who took off.
As Mark said, 6 months to the day. Maybe, did you read this, Anne? Maybe you don't know this. 6 months to the day after 9/11, what do you think the Immigration and Naturalization Services did?
Go on.
They mailed out 2 student visas to Muhammad Atta and Marwan Al-Shaheh at their Florida flight school.
Oh, yeah.
As Mark says, unfortunately, Messrs. Atta and Shaheh were unable to avail themselves of their new American visas, as they had neglected to have their mail forwarded to their new address, Big Smoking Hole in the Ground, Lower Manhattan. That is your federal government at work. So
that's unbelievable.
They're handing out visas to people, to the most photographed people on the planet. And
you think so? It's almost like no hand went into dealing with that visa.
No.
It's almost like a machine dealt with it.
Yes,
because as you say, the photographs of them. I mean, sure, no one didn't know Muhammad Atta's name. It was like,
but also you've got all these agencies in the world, in America, these intelligence agencies. The Peter Strzok, by the way, and Lisa Page and Mueller and all those people, all those straight shooting, hard hitting FBI guys strutting around Washington. I mean, they're on high alert. They're trying to find out all the conspirators of 9/11. Was there not a watch list? Was any time these guys' names come up in any database anywhere, we need to know now. So, but imagine the process of issuing them visas. That, a lot of people have to press buttons there.
Oh yeah,
and
there's a lot of hands involved in that.
Post
it's not one. Yeah, it's not one person.
Stick it in an envelope, and nobody noticed that, and said this has to stop. And what did George Bush do? He acted decisively, as says Mark Steyn.
Decisively?
And moved Janice Sposato sideways to the post of, and this is almost like a joke, to the post of Assistant Deputy Executive Associate Commissioner for Immigration Services. As he says, where she would need a really large business card. But that, and Mark makes the point, America is a land that rewards failure, right? As he says, see General Miley's war chest, of medals.
Yeah. Yes.
But when we spent that year in DC when we first came to America, and that's why our telephone numbers are DC ones, a matter of eternal shame to us. We found that too was DC particularly was a land that rewarded failure.
Yes.
That hey, what give me $20,000 yours and I will make your documentary, $20,000 a month and I'll make your documentary successful. Well, what did you do in the past? Well, I ran Romney's digital outreach campaign. So, excuse me, you ran Romney's digital outreach campaign and you're a complete failure and loser and you're still in business? I ran John McCain's outreach to Hispanics. So you basically lost all these Hispanic votes for McCain. And you want me to, and they do, and people pay them, and they get hired by the next presidential. Well, this is why it was so easy for Trump to come in and not hire any of them. Can you imagine Trump didn't hire any of them, which is why they all hated him. He didn't hire any of them and did better than all of them.
Well, it's like Newt Gingrich, by the way. I mean, Newt Gingrich was wrong about everything, and he's still rocking on. And not only rocking on, but people are asking him for advice because he's so interesting to listen to.
Yeah.
And he was just wrong about everything. He was certainly so wrong about the election. It's like it's a joke. You would think that if you were that wrong about something, that I'd be like, well, we're going to have to part ways with you now. We're not going to pay any more money because you're just wrong about everything. But not in DC. I'd actually make the distinction with Mark Steyn, actually. I don't think America is the country that rewards losers. I think
failures.
Washington, DC rewards failures and rewards people who are, who have distinguished themselves as being wrong about everything. They get particularly singled out for promotion and elevation in Washington, D.C. That certainly was our experience when we were there. It's an extraordinary town, and we didn't like it for that very reason. And I'm not talking about the consultancy class on the Democrat side. I'm talking about the consultancy class on the Conservative side.
Oh no, the biggest enemies of Conservatives are the consultancy class on the right, and they really showed their faces during Trump. As Mark Steyn said, Bush never mentioned the heroes of Flight 93. And he says he retreated to the same lame tropes of the ruling class, yakking on about nativism and religious bigotry. And as he says, religious bigotry, but it's Christian religious bigotry, not Islamic religious bigotry. And there's an immigration problem, and the immigration problem was that these 19 or 20 hijackers got in without even following the basic rules. And, he makes this an incredible story. In the 7-Eleven parking lot in Falls Church, Virginia, we know Falls Church well, 4 young men obtained their picture ID with which they boarded the flight on September 11. They did so by bribing a Salvadorian illegal immigrant to certify they all lived at his address. Hundreds lived in this modest flat. It's part of the non-gaming of the non-system that is not only tolerated but venerated by the Uni Party. And he calls the ruling class of the Democrats and the Republicans the Uni Party.
And you'd think a simple thing like that, wouldn't you think that somebody having hundreds of people staying at the same address would somehow, some of that vast intelligence service would pick up on that?
Yes. He says it's because of this terrible, terrible immigration system that Todd Beamer, Jeremy Glick, Tom Burnett, and the 36 other passengers and crew of Flight 93 are now dead. But he says, yet speaking at the memorial, Bush is so low and unworthy that he cannot resist the drivelling, mawkish sentimentalization of immigration. In fact, enabled the murder of Beamer and all. I love this bit. George W. Bush is so attentive to his own security that ahead of a state visit to the UK, he demanded the Queen replace every window at Windsor Castle.
Every window at Windsor Castle?
Yes. Her Majesty told him to bugger off, as well she should.
Yes.
Secure in their bubbles, the jet-setting globalists will never find themselves at the mercy of the fake ID record, a racket, and the other pathologies they loose upon their subjects. And then later in the article, he says, I'm with Her Majesty. Bugger off, Bush. So look, I think Anne is now going off to spend quality time with
a whole bunch of doctors. But before I go, I wanted to call out a really nice message that cheered me up as I was dealing with my pain from Pinhead, by the way. And all I've got to say to everyone listening here, be Pinhead. So here's what she said, or he said. I recently gave a small amount to My Son Hunter movie and discovered the Anne and Phelim scoop. So much fun, laughs and serious information packed into this podcast. Loved the cheese story.
What's the cheese story?
The cheese story about the wedding that we went to in Ireland, the very, 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 very posh wedding of our relative, and where I spotted this massive cheese board, really, I'm not sure.
A cheese board twice. The
size of this table.
That's bigger than this. I remember it went on for tables.
Oh, it was unbelievable. Anyway, yes, so she liked that story and how I asked the girl getting married if she wouldn't mind if I took the cheese with me, because after it was gone over and pawed over by everybody else. But there was a lot of cheese there. I knew it would never be eaten. Anyway, she loved the cheese story. I really want to meet other fans and start groups. Here's an interesting idea: to watch and discuss the latest episodes while enjoying some of the recipes. FYI, I send my star rating, and every time I tapped on a star, I gave this show 5 stars.
So that's on the Apple podcast
so please,
icon.
So please do that. Please give us a star rating, and please leave a message, because it really matters an awful lot to us. And we don't have a recipe this week. I'm very sorry, because of me.
Because of your disablement.
Yes. But Phelan's going to talk to Brian Godawa now. And
so please leave a comment on YouTube. We read them. We try and respond to them all. But also leave a comment on the Apple podcast. If you're listening to this on your Apple, go in there, leave a comment, leave a star rating. It's important. It pushes us up through the ratings, and it's important and leaves it easier for other people to find us. So you're going to have to spend some quality time with your doctors now. Then.
So yes. So
you're going to have surgery in a few days.
And the other thing I should say to all of you is just don't break your clavicle. Don't break anything, actually. But I have to say the clavicle is a bit of a disaster now. I'm fairly disabled, but anyway. It could be worse. I suppose it could be worse. I could have broken my head in two,
Actually, that's a great picture of you, and I'm going to get a picture now of you. Magda, can you give me the phone? Again, I'm going to take a picture now. I'm going to say this to everyone, and then we're going to put the picture up. But
yes,
it's a great picture of you,
of me, of Hopalong, and the dog,
and the patient,
and the patient.
There you go.
All right. So, yeah, that's it for me. So,
okay, I'm going to go.
Next time I'm here, I will have had the operation.
Yeah. Well, we wish you the best. Huh?
Thank you.
I'm sure everyone out there, go on the comments now and wish Anne all the best, please, in her operation. And
tell me your clavicle stories. Everyone has a clavicle story.
Yes,
I'm sure. I didn't know what a clavicle was, but I know what a clavicle is now, and I know exactly where it is.
Actually, we'll put the X-ray of your
you can
clavicle.
Look at my X-rays. Yeah, my very impressive X-ray. Very impressive.
Wow, what a clavicle!
Yeah, what a clavicle! Pooh. What a broken clavicle!
Never saw a clavicle guy before. Yeah. Okay, listen. I'm going to interview Phil Kerpen now, and I interviewed him earlier, and then I'm going to interview, and then I'm going to wrap up the show. But good luck with your clavicle, Anne.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
So we're joined now by Phil Kerpen. Phil is a great friend of ours and an unlikely hero of the Chinese virus wars. He's been doing invaluable work on the story and how it's been used by politicians to undermine our freedoms. I think I first met Phil maybe 10 years ago when you worked for Americans for Prosperity, and I've been following his progress ever since. And I say he's an unlikely hero because actually, he's president of the an organization called American Commitment and the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. And really, that is a free market. Correct me if I'm wrong. A free market organization. And a free trade and those kind of policies and economics, rather than what you've become really famous for now is looking at the attempts by people to use the virus to undermine freedoms and use dodgy science. Am I correct in that, Phil? Or welcome to the show, Phil.
Yeah,
and tell me if I've completely mischaracterized you.
No, that's about right. Normally I work on fiscal issues, regulatory issues, that kind of stuff, energy policy, healthcare policy, tech policy, but everything economic, to your point. But, it's hard to focus on things like taxes and spending when there's a dictate shutting down half the businesses in town or all the businesses in town, or when the schools are all closed. And so, I just think the heavy-handedness of the COVID interventions has been so over the top that it's eclipsed all of the normal economic fights that we have. And until we can move past the COVID craziness, it's hard to focus on the usual economic issues.
Yeah, they say bad generals fight the last war. You're not fighting the last war. You're fighting the current war. And we're very grateful for that, actually. Bad generals always can win the last war, but they don't realize the world has changed. The world has changed. I remember when this started, we were at dinner with someone who you might back then have called a conspiracy theorist, right? Had a lot of strange views, and I remember her telling us that not strange, but views outside the mainstream, telling us that this is early days of the COVID. There was going to be vaccine passports. There was going to be mandates and all. And we're going, no. That's not there's no suggestion of that at all. And she's going, it's coming. And I'm going, no. And of course, I seem to be spending a lot of this virus time apologizing to people who I maligned early on when the virus first arrived. So at the moment we have a vaccine mandate from Joe Biden, from the Biden administration. Tell us what that mandate is, and is it needed? Do you think it's needed, and what effect is it going to have?
Well, there's sort of two parts to it. One is that federal employees and federal contractors, so companies that contract with the federal government, are required to have all of their employees vaccinated. And there's no opt-out. There's no testing alternative. It's if you want to keep your job, you have to get vaccinated, or at least sign an attestation saying that you are vaccinated. So I'm sure some federal employees will just lie, say, yes, I'm vaccinated, sign the form. But of course, making a false statement to the federal government is potentially criminal. And so, some will quit instead, obviously, rather than lie about that. And that's that's the most heavy-handed mandate, is the one for federal employees and employees of contractors of the federal government. Now, the other thing that was announced by the president is a private sector mandate. And this is sort of an indirect mandate, because what he's done is he's asked the OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, to issue a workplace emergency temporary standard that would require all employees of every company with more than 100 employees to have every employee either be vaccinated or submit to weekly testing for the coronavirus. And we haven't seen the actual regulations, not been written yet. So we don't know exactly what the details will be, and therefore the legal vulnerabilities and so forth. But just on the headline version that we got from the president, there's a lot of curiosity in that, because it's hard to understand why companies that have 100 employees would have different virus risk than companies with 99. It's based on total employees in the company, not the number of workers in a particular location, which also seems kind of strange if it's supposedly a workplace safety regulation. But perhaps the dead giveaway of what this really is one of the liberal pundits, I forget which one, wrote on Twitter that this is just a backdoor to a national vaccine mandate. They're making it look like a workplace regulation to get around the president's previous statements that he can't mandate it for a blanket national mandate. And the White House Chief of Staff, Ron Klain, retweeted it. And so they're essentially admitting, yes, this is our workaround, our backdoor to a national vaccine mandate.
There's so much, and what you just said, there's so much, no opt-out for federal employees. And, look, you'd be crazy if you were to lie to the federal government. They will come after you like a ton of bricks, unless you're a Clinton or an FBI agent who forged a FISA warrant, or stole classified documents. Then you get a slap on the wrists. But if they want to come after you, you will spend, a year in jail, and lose everything, just for taking on the federal government. So I wouldn't advise anyone to lie about it. So no opt out. Of course, the federal government is so massive now. That is a massive number of people that's going to affect. And then, as you say, this arbitrary cutoff of 100 people. I mean, it's a very liberal idea too, that big business needs more protection than small business. Look, I remember when we first started doing what we do, I made a documentary called Mind Your Own Business, and it was about mining companies in developing countries, and how that they bring healthcare, that they bring computer industries, because mining now is high tech, right? They bring people learn skills, people learn international standards. I remember driving through Madagascar with the guy from this local from the mining company driving us, and he suddenly stops the vehicle on this treacherous road and pulls it over to take a phone call. Now, that was in the early days of mobile phones, and no one pulled in. Everyone was on the phone in their car, right? So he'd been told, if the international standard was in these mining companies, if you answer your phone whilst driving our vehicle, you get fired. He pulled in because the international standard of a multinational was hugely superior to anything local. I mean, and people were saying to me, "Oh, multinational companies are terrible. Big companies are terrible. Small companies." And I'm going, "You don't get on a plane built by Joe's Mechanics. You get on a plane built by Boeing. You love big business, right? Big business is safer than smaller businesses. They have, and So the idea that big businesses need more protections than smaller business, or need more regulations than smaller business, just doesn't stand up to common sense.
Well, I think they wanted to be able to say, we're not imposing a regulatory burden on mom and pop. And so they picked this number of 100 employees. I actually think they're going to have some legal difficulty on this question. If they wanted to claim that it's a workplace safety standard, then it should have been based on the number of employees in a particular location, not the number of employees in the whole company, which just seems arbitrary. So I do think they have some potential problems on that front.
Let's put all science aside, whether it's good science, bad science, and different science. This is a hugely political decision by the Biden administration. They're doing it with an eye to, or maybe it's an idea. Is it ideological or is it political? Right? Are they blinded by ideology, or is this a move to win votes in the midterms to make the Republicans appear extremist, uncaring, anti-science? Which is it? Is it ideological or political, do you think?
I think it's principally political. Look, I mean, this is an administration that saw total collapse in the president's job approval rating following the disaster in Afghanistan. He went from a very strong net positive position to underwater in most polls almost instantly. And it really changed just the way people perceive the fitness of the president for office and the competence of the administration more broadly. And I think that what the political calculation behind the big speech and what they're doing now is they see an opportunity to polarize the country between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. And they know that the vaccinated is a significantly larger group than the unvaccinated. And so if they can successfully polarize the country and rally the vaccinated to their side, they think that shores them up politically. And I think that's the real motivation behind it. It's hard otherwise to understand the fundamental contradiction in the president's speech and all of these new policies where he says the vaccine is great, it works, vaccinated people are extremely safe, and unvaccinated people are a threat to the vaccinated. There's such dissonance between those two ideas that it just feels like scapegoating and polarization for the sake of polarization. So I think it is politically motivated.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I should point out here that I'm vaccinated, right? But what we're talking about here is A, the vaccine mandate, and B, whether and now I want to actually talk about whether it's actually effective. And we're not scientists, right? But we do look at statistics and we do look at reports. And you're right. I mean, either these people believe the vaccine is the shield that it says it is, and if it is, then why do they care about unvaccinated people? Or it's not. And I mean, certainly the reports. I mean, here's a headline from the Irish Times: 54% of people in hospitals in Ireland, where I'm from, are vaccinated. And you also, I think there was a report from Britain last week about the number of people hospitalized and dying from COVID. That seems to tell us about that.
It was the number of positive tests. So it was the case counts. And what they actually found in the most recent UK data. And by the way, the United States has the worst data in the world in terms of vaccinated versus unvaccinated. You can't get any kind of a handle on the US data. So we need to look to other countries to get a better understanding of what's going on. They almost all have better data than the US. And there was a report that came out in the UK on Friday that had the rates of infections for both vaccinated and unvaccinated broken out by age. So they had, in this age, in 10 to 20 and 20 to 30 and so forth, vaccinated versus unvaccinated rates. So the number of positive tests they were getting per 100,000 vaccinated people in this age group versus per 100,000 unvaccinated in the same age group. And they actually now found that, I think this was a report that covered the last 2 weeks. They found that over the period of that report, the case rate is now higher in the vaccinated in the UK between the ages of 40 and 79 than the unvaccinated case rate, which is to say that, and that's a pretty big age range. That's covering, that's covering a huge portion of the population.
Exactly.
They're now finding
Britain, especially, I think, which Britain has an older demographic, I think.
So let me just add, because I think this is important. They did, however, find that the hospitalization and death rates were much lower among the vaccinated. So I think that then this is consistent with data we're seeing from other places. The vaccine is just not very effective at stopping transmission and mild cases. And so you can still get a significant number of cases among vaccinated people, but they're much less likely to be severe than if you're vaccinated. So there's a lot of benefit from the vaccine, but it doesn't prevent you from becoming a case for the most part. It prevents you from being hospitalized or dying. So there's a lot of benefit to the individual who gets the vaccine. But in terms of the societal benefit, I think it's very clear now that we should not, you shouldn't care very much whether someone else makes a different choice about the vaccine in terms of the implication for your own risk and your own exposure. Because even if someone is vaccinated, they can still get it, they can still transmit it at a similar rate to people who are not. And so, the idea that all of the data is now showing this increasingly, and then they roll out these mandates and passports and sort of policies that are premised on the idea that you're safer if other people are vaccinated, means that we've now got policies that are completely unhinged from what we're seeing in the data.
You think this is a political decision here? Is it to rally the base? Is it to?
Yeah, I think it's to rally. I think it's to reconsolidate the Democratic base and to polarize the country between vaccinated and unvaccinated. And I think that they see that as particularly important going into the fall and the winter because, there's still a lot that we don't understand about the seasonality of this virus, obviously, but just at the most basic level, the South was bad last summer and it was even worse this summer.
Yes.
And I think they're very worried that the North, which was bad last winter, will be even worse this winter. And I think that they want to create a pre-existing scapegoating narrative to deflect blame and to say, it's not you did the right thing, it's these people, blame them. And I think
it's the media is terrible. I mean, all these stories about Florida, the huge rise in cases in Florida in recent months. And it's like, have you been to Florida in the summer? This is a disease of contact, right?
It's their indoor season in the South.
It's their indoor season, right? I mean, I remember at the beginning, I have a relative who's a doctor, and they said viruses are more dangerous in winters because people are indoors, right? Florida in summer, people are indoors. People, if you're outdoors, the chances of you catching a virus are very limited. But not one media report would give Florida the credit of saying, this is their, as you say, this is their indoor season. So we've had the South's indoor season, and now we're going to have the North's indoor season. And of course, there's going to be a rise of cases in the North.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So, so I think they want to be able to say, in the South, it was the horrible, evil governors. It's their fault. In the North, the governors did everything right and they're wonderful. But it was those bad unvaccinated people, however small their numbers might have been, they're to blame. And so I think that's why they're trying to polarize, ahead of heading into it.
Yeah. Actually, it's a good point, actually. I mean, have we had any breakdown about the geographical spread? I mean, are there less unvaccinated people in the North, in say New York and New Jersey and places like that, or do we know that?
Well, Florida's got a pretty high vaccination number. They're kind of right in the middle. They're average nationally. So some of these other states are low. So states like Mississippi and Alabama are much lower than other states. But that really wasn't the issue in Florida, especially among seniors. Florida has a very high vaccination rate.
Of course.
In the North, we've got a very different situation than some of these southern states. It's not generally the political conservatives and the Trump supporters in the North who are not vaccinated. It's mostly the racial minorities. And we've got New York City, I think it's 30. The vaccination of Black residents is still under 40%. It's 30 something. And so, when you talk about a vaccine passport system in New York City right now, where you can't go inside a restaurant, you can't go to a theater, you can't, all of these cultural institutions, museums now all require proof of vaccination. In a sense, they're excluding. In a sense, it's racial discrimination.
Yes.
It certainly has that effect, and that's largely the population that they're excluding. And it'll be interesting to see kind of how they navigate the reporting on that aspect of it. If we do have, a high disease burden among the unvaccinated in the North, it's going to be disproportionately minority.
This is the thing liberals do. They talk about racial disparate outcomes, right? So if minorities are seen to be less prominent in universities or in work this workplace or that workplace, or in this group or that group. It's because of discrimination. If minorities are excluded from restaurants and cultural institutions and state buildings in New York because they don't have vaccines, then we just say that's just the way of the world. So they cherry pick where they want to cry racism. And another thing is, how do they think they're going to get? Do they want people to be vaccinated? Because if you wanted people to be vaccinated, you wouldn't call them idiots. You wouldn't, right? It's like they don't really want these people to be vaccinated. They want an enemy. They want a scapegoat. They want this narrative because they're paying hundreds of millions, probably billions, to marketing companies, to psychological experts, how to get your message out. And they're not telling them, well, the way you'll get this message out is you call people idiots, you call them fascists, you call them racists, you call them rednecks, all the things that they are doing, right? And by the way, the Democrats are great at getting a message and spreading it out to their supporters. So it looks like they don't want people to be vaccinated.
I don't know that they thought through that well. I think that it's certainly having that effect. I don't know if it's intentional. But look, there's a massive trust deficit in this country. People don't trust politicians. They certainly don't trust, public health experts and public health authorities. And so, when they say, you've got to get vaccinated, we're going to force you, we're going to lock you out of stuff, we're going to make you lose your job. If somebody wasn't convinced that it was in their best interest to get vaccinated before, and now you're saying, we're going to do all these horrible things, you're not going to convince them. You may, under duress, some of them may go along with it just to be able to live their life, but they're going to do so reluctantly, and they're certainly not going to change their mind. And frankly, I think that the number one problem that they've made that causes suspicion of them on the vaccine and all related issues is they refuse to recognize that people who are already infected have very strong immunity. We've got so many studies on this now. And people who've already been infected have very strong immunity without the vaccine, and they have the highest rate of adverse reactions because their body's already seen the virus, and so they get the vaccine, they're more likely to have an adverse reaction. I think that if they designed a public health campaign where they said it's really important for people who haven't been infected before to get vaccinated, that they would have it would be received much more favorably because it would have logic to it. What we have now.
Yeah, it makes common sense, right? It appeals to people. Look, if you have, they've gotten me to the stage where I'm kind of sheepish to admit I'm vaccinated, right?
Well, here's
I feel like an idiot, Go ahead.
Look, I think almost everyone is going to get this virus. All right, we've every wave we say, oh, maybe this will be the last wave. Then there's another wave, and we're at whatever it's at now. 50 or 60% of the population in many states has already had it. And yet it doesn't seem to be slowing down, which means it's going to come back. It's going to be 89. It's going to be over time. I think nearly everyone will be exposed to this, which means you're not going to run and hide. You're not going to stop it with a mask. You're not going to stop it with a lockdown. The question, I think, and the reason that there's a lot of value to the vaccine, especially if you're in a risk category, you're overweight, or you're in the elderly category, the reason there's a lot of benefit to the vaccine is if you've had the vaccine first, you're much less likely to have a severe outcome. You're less likely to be hospitalized and die. You're not going to avoid probably getting sick, though. Everyone's going to get the virus sooner or later. It's just a question, I think, of, how mild can you make that first encounter with the virus is really where the benefit of the vaccine comes in. For people who've already had that first encounter with the virus, there's very little additional benefit. There's a little bit. But even the CDC, the big study they put out to claim that prior infected people can benefit from the virus was this Kentucky study, and they headlined it, twice as likely to be reinfected if you haven't had the vaccine than if you had. For people who've already had it, they said, if you don't get the vaccine, you're twice as likely to be reinfected. And then you drill down into the numbers, and it was like 0.04% risk of being reinfected without the vaccine. You can cut it in half to 0.02. I was like, okay, well, yes, you could cut it in half, but in absolute terms, it's essentially near zero anyway. And so it's not that there's no benefit, but the way they're presenting it is deceptive, I would say.
It's deceptive, of course. And look, again, if they really, really wanted people to be vaccinated, they wouldn't be so deceptive. I mean, they'd be a lot more clinical and a lot more. And, there's only so many resources, right? And why don't they focus them on people who need the resources?
Related to that, they also, in my judgment, should stop claiming that masks provide protection, or they should be honest that any protection is extremely minimal, and not even should in the same conversation as the vaccine, because instead they say mask and vax, anti-vax, anti-mask, mask and vax, almost as if they're interchangeable. And then you see these heartbreaking stories of, for instance, I saw this story over the weekend that in Miami, 3 school teachers died of COVID. And you look at the picture, all 3 of them were very overweight. They were all African-American. And then you read in the story, it says they all wore masks all the time and they were unvaccinated. And say, okay, well, I think those are probably people who were mistakenly led to believe that if you had a mask, you were protected and you didn't need to worry about the vaccine. And so, the refusal to just prevent accurate information as opposed to prevent, all this whole series of so-called noble lies that are all about, instead of just telling the truth, they try to say what they think you need to hear to behave in the way they want you to behave. And it ends up backfiring.
Oh, no, of course it does.
People don't trust them, so they don't behave the way they want.
Yeah, no, people don't trust them. And people get false sense of security too, and behave accordingly. Yeah. How's the Republican Party doing in all this? I mean, are they... where are they? I mean, it's a very weird situation. This is why I think maybe Biden's on to something politically, right? He's sort of wrong. I mean, there's no solid opposition against him, is there? It's people like you and me questioning. There's no real solid response to him, is there? To the administration? Well,
it's tough. I mean, I think that most elected Republicans don't really know how to navigate these vaccine issues because they do think the vaccine's beneficial by and large, but they've got a segment of their own base that thinks that the vaccine is dangerous.
Yes,
and it's against the vaccine, and so they're sort of hesitant to even talk about it because they don't want. On the one hand, they could anger the media, on the other, they can anger a lot of their base. Generally, taking a nuanced position is not easy to do in sound bites and in media coverage. And so they don't have the opportunity to talk at length the way we've been talking. So most of them shy away from, taking public positions, or they try to hedge themselves in different ways. And, that makes it difficult. I do think that the coerciveness of what the administration is now proposing presents an opportunity for Republicans to say, look, I think there's benefit of the vaccine. I think people should do it if it makes sense for their situation. Talk to their doctor, but it should not be a mandatory condition of employment. We should not separate people out based on vaccination status for testing programs, and we certainly shouldn't have the federal government dictating it from Washington. And that is a little bit of a sweet spot for Republicans. The idea of leave it up to localities, private sector. Don't have Washington dictating it from on high, and certainly not by executive order. If you're going to do it, at least have the decency to vote in Congress. So there are a lot of aspects of this Biden proposal that should make Republicans more comfortable in fighting back than they've been kind of on the more general issue.
We really have to go here, but I to me, one of the more amusing or shocking parts of this is you remember before COVID, there was a significant anti-vax movement in America, as in people not wanting their children vaccinated. And it was the media may not have really highlighted this, but it was actually it was led by liberals. It was heavily focused in blue areas and rich blue areas. The anti-vaccine movement was a movement of upper middle class women, mostly liberal women, who didn't trust big pharma. That aspect of the anti-vax movement has seemed to have just disappeared now. They're the biggest cheerleaders for almost mandated vaccines. Is that correct, or is there an element?
Well, there's still Robert Kennedy Jr.'s group, and there definitely are still sort of vaccine skeptics on the left that have gotten very involved in sort of all these fights. But I think that sort of by and large, the pushback has come from the right, just because the issues become so polarized and politicized, and sort of those are the comfortable party lines that people fall back into. But I will say this, I've always been very mocking and dismissive towards those people in the past, and I still generally disagree with them from what I've been able to understand of the science of these vaccines. But I'm far less dismissive than I was in the past, because I'm not sure that we can defer to authorities and assume that they are representing things, accurately. And I think that's a major potential sort of external, ongoing, continuing harm of the way this has all been handled, which is, I'm not sure that these institutions will be able to rebuild their credibility.
Yeah, totally. No. As I say, I've spent most of the time of the virus, apologizing to people who I had dismissed as conspiracy theorists before. Not apologizing for certain aspects of it. I still think they're wrong, I'm right. But they said lots of things that have come through about this particular virus era, and and of course that makes me, that just reinforces their beliefs that all the other things that they think that maybe are true. And it also destroys any trust that they have in CDC, any trust they have in government, any trust they have in science. And, they are the real losers here, and they're losing complete credibility. And you need them sometimes.
Yeah, well, look, let's look at this whole booster issue. Okay. The White House came out and said, we're going to do boosters by September 20th. The two top vaccine officials at the FDA both submitted their resignations. They have an article out in The Lancet today with a bunch of other international experts making the case on why boosters are not indicated based on the science that we have right now. Now, I don't know if those FDA officials are right or whoever's advising the White House is right, but I do know that having the president announce something politically from the White House that the FDA experts are disagreeing with is a total disaster, whether we're going to need boosters or not, because when the time comes and they do recommend boosters, how will anyone know if that was based on an actual assessment of the science or a political decision?
Funny, that's a concern of mine. I'm sitting here thinking, well, do I need a booster, right? And and the answer is maybe, but when the government tells you have to have a booster, and as you say, when it's Joe Biden announcing it from the White House, but then when he tells you have to wear a mask, or if you have a company more than 100 people, the science is that it needs to be mandated. I don't trust them about anything, and it's really hard to come to a risk analysis. It's my own risk analysis. Like what's good for me, and it's hard because I don't trust what they're saying now.
Maybe these FDA scientists are full of it and they're the ones who are wrong, but how is someone supposed to determine that? That's and so what ends up happening is people just don't know who to trust. They don't know what to do. And so if they were going to have a booster plan, you have to let the FDA do its analysis first and publish something. You can't announce it from the White House. Now, even if it is needed, people won't believe it. So it's a ridiculous way to operate.
And isn't conducting this interview here because she's broken her clavicle, and for the first week of her broken clavicle, there was a serious debate among her doctors whether she needed surgery or not. We were taking lots of advice from lots of doctors and disinterested doctors, and they say doctors differ, patients die, right? But I don't mind doctors differing. I never thought that any of these doctors were they were giving us their genuine opinion based on years of experience. But Joe Biden telling me whether Anne needs a clavicle, a mandate or is a completely different kettle of fish. And Joe Biden interpreting these doctors' thoughts and opinions destroys any confidence I have in both Joe Biden and then the doctors. And it's something that's going to have long-term consequences. And by the way, it's going to have really long-term consequences for their other favorite pet projects like climate, it just goes on and all the other science, transgender, they like that, but are you going to believe doctors now? They're going to suffer the consequences of this politicization.
Well, that may actually ultimately be a positive if people see sort of appeals to authority as unscientific, which they generally are. You need to present the evidence, not just say because we say so. And if that makes people more skeptical about some of these pronouncements that are supposedly, the science is settled and this kind of thing, that could be a positive out of this.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Phil. Thanks for joining us. And I unfortunately, I think we'll be talking to you again. I don't mean that the way it sounds, but I think this story's not over, and we're going to need your wise thoughts again, probably quite shortly. So thank you very much. Oh, where can people get you? Where can people follow you? Give us your where you're best at.
I'll give you three things. AmericanCommitment.org is the website for my main organization. If people are interested in those economic policy issues that we said aren't that important anymore, that's where my work on those is, AmericanCommitment.org. The other thing I do, Committee to Unleash Prosperity with Steve Moore and Art Laffer and Steve Forbes. We've got a free daily newsletter if people want to get that, Committee to Unleash Prosperity.com. And I'm also a Twitter addict. I'm on there all day. It's just my last name, Kerpen, Kerpen, and that's probably where almost all of my COVID-related stuff is. So if that's what you're interested in, follow the Twitter.
Definitely. I think people should, obviously the other, you can get the other newsletters, but Kerpen, Kerpen on Twitter. That's where we follow you. That's why you're on here today, because we saw you on Twitter again saying some very interesting things. So that's the place to go. And thanks very much, Phil.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye. So, yes, that was a great interview there with Phil Kerpen. We are living in a world of madness. Where even the winner of the US Open, her parents couldn't visit to watch her win because you're not allowed to visit from the UK, but you can come from Mexico, you can come from Germany. Some of your more observant viewers, by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, may have noticed that Anne is looking not quite herself at the moment. She is wearing a hat, but
top of the morning to you.
So Anne has gone off to spend more quality time with her doctors, and we're joined now by Brian Godawa, screenwriter extraordinaire, novelist extraordinaire, and screenwriter of the My Son Hunter movie. So Brian, as you know, I think we've mentioned on previous podcasts, is a dirty, stinking rat who's left the Los Angeles sinking ship and has gone to Texas. And
y'all.
Yeah, and is wearing Anne's hat for some reason that I'm sure
because I'm confident in my own masculinity.
Right.
To be able to take her place, I just wanted to wear the signature hat. That was it.
Okay. It's a free country, apparently. So Brian's here. Actually, Brian is back in LA because Brian today is going to spend some quality time.
By the way, can I interrupt you like you guys interrupt each other? Because then that will be... Will that be good?
You see, Brian, right. You have to put in the time. You have to be married to me for 20 years before you're allowed to interrupt me.
All right, I'm going.
That's right. Brian is actually here because he's going to spend some quality time with the director of My Son Hunter, Robert Davi, and they're going to go through the script and finesse it. So Brian is a writer, screenwriter, perhaps best known for writing the movie To End All Wars, which starred Kiefer Sutherland. But he is also a wonderful author of biblical fiction. Is that the correct phrase for it? Where he takes parts of the Bible and fictionalizes aspects of it that are not covered by the Bible, fills in the gaps, so to speak. So welcome to the show, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
No problem.
Although I hate to have to come back to LA and visit, but I guess it's okay. It's a little cold here, but
It's cold in Venice. You hate coming back. Tell me. No, you miss it, Brian. Come on.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it, but I don't miss it yet. So I've been gone almost a year. I don't miss it yet. There are things about California that I miss. Obviously,
what?
Obviously the weather.
Right.
But that's the easy one. But I honestly I didn't realize how much I would miss it until I was gone, and then it's like. And then when we didn't have the weather, and it's just like, wow, I started having weather dreams, actually.
Weather dreams? Yeah. That's weird.
Yeah. So
what happens in a weather dream?
Well, seriously, I was like, I noticed that I was in a balmy day with palm trees. I'm not kidding you. And I woke up that morning, I'm like going, oh, that's my first weather dream of missing the weather. So, but, and of course there's some great people here. But,
Thank you for that,
other
Brian.
than that, everything else is going to hell in a handbasket, So
you're quite smug about leaving, aren't you, Brian?
Yeah, and I am proud to be a Texan. I already consider myself a Texan. So now people who are moving now into our area from Los Angeles, I go, hey, wait a minute now.
Yeah.
Leave Los Angeles, whatever, California. Leave California with you. We don't want no Californication here.
Well, you not sort of go, we don't want your sort around here and spit chewing tobacco at their feet.
I'm almost
By the way,
there.
I'm not sure you'll be allowed back into Texas wearing a hat like that.
No, that's true. It has to be, it has to be a certain kind of hat, yeah.
So, Brian, I suppose you're here to work with Robert for a few days on the script of My Son Hunter. So we're hoping to make a big announcement about casting very soon. We've already chosen Robert Davi to be the director. We're so excited that he's part of it. My Son Hunter is going to be the biopic about Hunter Biden, and it's basically been funded by you guys, our listeners, our viewers. We still are short, by the way. If you want to go to mysonhunter.com, I know many of you have gone. If you haven't, please look. I mean, this guy's not cheap, right? This guy is not cheap, And you see the hotel bill he's running out. I mean, come on. I mean, it's just out of all. Oi. So there are expenses. In all seriousness, there are expenses that we're now incurring bills. Please, if you haven't given now and you thought about it, please go to mysonhunter.com. If you have given, think about giving again. We've had, I think it's almost like 10,000 people have made this film happen. We've raised over 1.6 million. The target is 2.5. Help us make it happen, and let's get the truth out there, because the media, by the way, are not going to cover this story unless they're forced to. Hollywood's not going to cover it. It's all up to you to get this story out there.
And listen, if I can just throw something in there too, like all my life, I've been a conservative and a Christian in Hollywood, and I've been wanting to, sort of tell stories and make movies. And, when I come across conservatives or Christians who complain about Hollywood, why don't they make anything that we like, yada, yada. And this is the kind of opportunity that we are guerrilla filmmakers now. And if you want some good quality material that has a viewpoint that you can appreciate instead of always being preached at from woke culture, then you support this. Put your money where your mouth is. And I don't mean to be too condescending, but I say that because so many just complain and very little do anything. So I'll be the condescending preacher for today. Get out that wallet, book. Get that money in. But I mean it, because it's just so needed. It's just so needed. And if we don't pony up, we're not going to get this stuff made.
Tell people what a screenwriter is, by the way, for those who don't know.
Someone who writes screens. No. So, so screenwriter is the individual who writes the words on the page. It's like it's the words on the page from which everything comes. In other words, as the screenwriter writes the story, writes the action, writes what's going to happen, writes all the dialogue, all that stuff. Most people know about that, obviously, but that becomes the blueprint for the movie. And it's when in the end, a lot of people say, like Spielberg has said, if it ain't on a page, it ain't on the stage, and there is some acknowledgement of, in a sense, if it all starts with a great script. If you don't have a great script and great writing, it's not gonna be right.
Totally.
However, in reality, by the time that movie gets made, there are hundreds of inputs. Producers have input. The director comes on board and he shapes it to be his baby, his project, right? And everybody around the director, they all bring added perspectives and added help to the script that helps blossom it to be ultimately the final movie.
No, but you're right. The writer, I think, who was it? Zelnick said, the writer is the most important person in Hollywood, but don't tell him.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and
because he'll ask for more money.
Yeah, the line is, you can make a bad movie out of a good script, but you can't make a good movie out of a bad script.
Yeah,
and I think at the moment, what are we on, version 22?
Yeah, something like that. But that doesn't mean we rewrote the whole thing over 22 times. But what happens is, anytime there's a significant change, like say you guys call me and say, hey, we realized this one scene we can't afford this set or something, so give it a different set, or let's work a little bit on the dialogue in this moment.
Yes.
And I'll make that one change. But because it's a change to the script, it has to become a new draft. So
and that is another reason, by the way, why we need funding, is because we're making decisions now, and we're actually saying to Brian, look, you've in fact, there's one scene I'm thinking about that you've just written, and I said it's a great scene, and I'm talking to the line producer, and the line producer says, but is it a $20,000 scene? Right? Is it so great? And I'm thinking we can't afford that, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so many other demands on the money, and this is why we need your help. Is so the best scenes get in this movie. The money is not an object to stop us telling the truth.
And these guys, look, obviously I've got vested interest, but I mean this when I say they seek to make the most, they seek to do the best with the money they have. They're responsible, they're frugal. They're shooting it in Serbia. And that's in order to be able to get double your money's worth for what you can get, because they want the budget to look better than how much it actually is, type of thing.
That was the thing we did with Gosnell as well, was, the one thing I wanted our movie to look like was every other Hollywood movie.
Yeah, exactly.
You see so many Christian and so many conservative movies, and they don't look like movies. You can spot them you're flicking through the TV and you stop at a movie, you can spot immediately that it's a Christian or conservative movie. In general, now, obviously, in fact, they're
getting better now.
They're improving every day. Like that movie, I can only imagine. It had quality. I think this thing in Christian movies where you can't show people drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
And I think that movie suffered because of that, because the father character, he wasn't able to descend into the gutter as much.
Yeah.
So the redemption wasn't as powerful.
Yeah. If you don't portray evil accurately, if you don't portray the world out of which you're being redeemed, then the redemption you're showing in the story is not going to have power.
Yes. So, but that was a great movie, and there are great movies being made now in the Christian sphere, but for a lot, but there are really bad ones as well in the conservative sphere. So, I mean, we wanted the Gosnell movie to look like a Hollywood movie, and we want My Son Hunter to look like a Hollywood movie. We want people to flick through the TV channels, come across this, or watch it on a streamer, and come across this, and it looks like, because young people are not going to watch something that doesn't look like a movie.
Yeah.
They're going to be suspicious. What's that weird thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like they watch TikTok. You can spot a TikTok video the moment it opens, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't even need to. So, people are very responsive to genres and to way things should look. We started with this process so I'm the producer, and I said to you, what did I say to you? By the way, can I just say something? Please take that hat off.
Don't you like this little thing back here?
No, it's...
how's my hair look?
Yes. Thank
you.
God.
For an old man.
Phew. It was killing me looking at you there. Okay. People should vote in the YouTube comments whether they like Brian with the hat or without the hat. And if you like him with the hat, you'll be banned. Okay.
So how did this start? You basically said, Brian, we need something genius. No, just kidding.
And that guy wasn't available, so we hired you. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Boom.
That was good. But in all seriousness, so when this stuff, I don't remember exactly what happened, because obviously the laptop thing had been around for a little bit, but you basically came and said, we got to do a movie about the laptop because it was so important and so significant. And there was still a lot yet that we didn't know about it, right? And but we also know, well, how can you deal with something like all the stuff that's on the laptop? There's just so much material, and it's like, how are we going to make an entertaining story too? We don't want it to be a documentary.
No.
Right? You said that. No, this is a dramatic film. How can we dramatize it? And I thought, well, in order to dramatize so much material, we got to be able to sort of go through it quickly, and the pacing needs to be there, and the kind of movies that work well with that are satires, And of course, we've talked a lot about political satires that we love, like Wolf of Wall Street, Wag the Dog, Austin Powers, right?
Yes.
And so it was sort of like, well, let's go in that direction.
Yeah.
Let's do this satire, because then you can like jump in and out and put facts or whatever, put interesting information that would take a long time in a normal narrative to play out. Yeah. In a satire, you can like skits, right?
Yes.
So that was the origin of our genre, and I think that we also have already written, which we can't speak about, but we've already written a previous movie that has that same genre to it.
Yes.
And we're realizing this works well for what we're doing.
Yeah. And I suppose one thing we wanted to make sure not to do was not to demonize Hunter Biden. In fact, it wasn't so much funny. It's not that I care about Hunter Biden demonizing him. No, I don't want to attack someone for their flaws or their addictions. As we say, we're Irish. We can't attack anyone for our addictions. But it's not good storytelling to demonize people.
No, because when you watch all the political movies, I don't even know the names, because I try watching them and I just can't anymore. That Hollywood puts out, all the anti-Trump stuff and the anti-Republican stuff. It's just ridiculous. It's just hate speech, masquerading as a movie. And it's like, well, I don't want to do the opposite of that, where it turns people off, right? And the other thing is, though, the reason why I was drawn to this was, and it was something we talked about together because we both had this notion, was there was a fascinating human story at the center of this. It wasn't just the laptop is the hook, right?
The MacGuffin, as
yeah.
Hitchcock would say.
Yeah, it's the hook that brings us in, and it's a fast, And we thought, of course, his connection to strippers. So there's some stuff going on there that's funny, interesting, or whatever. But we both had been concerned about this father-son relationship, not just between Joe and Hunter, but with Bo, the brother and the son that had died, right?
Yeah.
And as we looked into it, it's like, wow, this is it's a tragedy. It's a tragic, but a tragedy is based on, a lot of times they have some good intent. Like, in other words, we're not going to make their relationship look bad. It's a relationship between the three of them that struggles through the issues of the favorite son, the F-up son, the father who and the perfection that they're all seeking, and the love and acceptance. It's all classic family father-son stories.
Well, so, I mean, I say this is a mixture of Austin Powers meets King Lear meets House of Cards, but King Lear is a very important part there, and King Lear was about favorite daughters and favorite, not favorite daughters, and the mess-up daughters, and that family dynamic, and people accepting flaws and not accepting flaws.
Yes.
So, Shakespeare was at this hundreds of years ago. And
exactly. That's what drew me to it and the other thing was the flaws. So obviously the flaws are fascinating. We already know a lot about Hunter's flaws, actually there's a lot that's suppressed, I guess, in the news, right? But if you look into it at all, you see, he's not just a drug addict. He's an addictive personality. He's addicted to sex and falling in love with strippers and all this really, I hate to say, but interesting, entertaining material. But like you said, not in a way of demonizing, in a way of saying, look, this is the tragedy of flawed characters seeking humanity, seeking to find their humanity, but having these flaws rip them apart. Yeah. So that's why I think it's not demonizing.
I remember speaking to a famous Hollywood figure, I won't mention his name, and I was trying to get him involved in this project. He was too busy with his own projects. But I said, well, what do you think of the project? And he leans back and he thinks like this, and he goes, ultimately Hunter hates his father, right? And I go, what? And he goes, like, why else would you want? This is the guy who's not the favorite son. Bo was the favorite son. He will never attain, and now it's even worse. Bo's dead, so Bo is super perfect. He will never attain that perfection. And
at the same time, Hunter's trying to get the love of his father.
Yes,
that's the irony. Yes. That's the human struggle that a lot of us go through.
But why else did he leave? This is guy said, why else did he leave the laptop unattended for a year? In some ways, he wanted to sabotage. I mean, he wanted to make money out of his father, but he also wanted to sabotage his political campaign in some way. It was just there's this tension there between the two of them that is just multi-layered and really fascinating. And I think you've really captured that in the script. And so you're going over now after that. We're literally leaving this interview and going over to Robert. What are you and Robert going to work on? What are you going to do in the next couple of days?
Well, this is part of the process.
This is Robert Davi, the director of My Son Hunter.
So part of the process of making a movie is, like I said, starts with the screenwriter all by himself, sitting there in front of the screen writing. But then once you get a director, the director comes on and he has to make it his vision too. And he already loves the script, but there's changes, or we just have to go through it step by step to make sure everything's as good as can be. And we're going to find lines that might need to be changed, or maybe things he wants to add that he's been thinking of. Mm-hmm. And I'll incorporate those into the draft so that it makes it more his as well, because he's the guy who's going to take it from here and get it made. Obviously, because of the producers, but the director is the one that has to then make it happen on screen.
Very much so, very much so. So he has to be happy with every line of it as well, and believe it and want to make it. So we're going to let you go. I have to go and spend some quality time with Anne's doctors now and surgeons, etc. And you are going to go to Robert Davi and surgically work. Yes. Get it? They say surgically work on the script. See what
Trying to protect my baby while still giving in, because it's now his baby.
So no, I was making the surgical metaphor. You see, I know. But you interrupted. Right? You made a better.
I'm supposed to interrupt.
No, but you made a baby metaphor. You took my metaphor and ignored it and made it. And
That's
gave.
Right.
I'm. This is my podcast. I do the metaphors. By the way.
Thanks, Ann. Yeah, I did what you said.
I get the metaphors. I get the. Gee. Yeah, welcome to LA, Brian.
Yeah. Well, I got to come on again next time.
Oh, yeah, if you're invited. Yeah, sure. Yeah, next time. Oh, we're busy. Oh, God, I didn't realize. Oh, next week. Oh, no, we're busy that week. that month, that year.
Well, Magda's got to be on my side.
Yeah. Yes.
No?
Thank you very much, folks, for watching and listening to the Alan Phelan Scoop. Don't forget to go to mysonhunter.com to make this happen, make this movie happen. And we will see you next week. Bye. And we'll have a full update on Anne's medical condition then. Bye.
Bye. Bye.